Rain hammered the cracked pavement, each drop a tiny explosion in the dim glow of the street lamp. An elderly woman, her coat threadbare and clinging to her frail frame, stood alone at the bus stop, her eyes fixed on the horizon as if willing the bus to appear. Then, she turned, her gaze locking onto the teenager slouched against the shelter, earbuds drowning out the world, and asked, "Young man, could I borrow your phone?" The boy, Ethan, barely 16, flinched at the sound of her voice. It wasn't just the question, it was the way she said it, her tone carrying a weight that cut through the rain's relentless rhythm. He pulled out one earbud, squinting at her through the drizzle. "My phone," he repeated, his voice thick with suspicion. Around them, the city churned. Cars hissed past, their headlights slicing the twilight, while the wind carried the faint wail of a distant siren. The woman nodded, her hands trembling as she clutched a tattered scarf. "Please," she said. "It's important." Ethan hesitated. His phone was his lifeline, text from friends, music, the game he'd been grinding for weeks. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of urgency that made his stomach twist. He glanced at the empty street, then back at her. "What for?" he asked, his thumb hovering over the screen. Her name was Clara, though she didn't offer it yet. At 78, she'd seen decades of winters colder than this one, but none as heavy with purpose. "I need to call someone," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Someone I haven't spoken to in a long time." Ethan frowned, his teenage instincts screaming to walk away, but his feet stayed rooted. He handed her the phone, its cracked screen glowing in her weathered hands. Clara's fingers moved slowly, as if each tap was a memory she had to unearth. She dialed a number, her lips moving silently as if rehearsing words she'd never said aloud. Ethan watched, curiosity creeping in. Who was she calling? Why now, in the middle of a downpour? The call connected, and Clara's breath hitched. "Hello," she whispered, her voice breaking. No answer came, only the faint crackle of a voicemail. She closed her eyes, disappointment carving deeper lines into her face, and handed the phone back. "Thank you," she said, her voice hollow. He didn't answer. Ethan shoved the phone into his pocket, unsure what to say. "Who's he?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Clara didn't respond immediately. She stared at the ground, where rainwater pooled around her worn shoes, then spoke. "My son," she said. "I haven't seen him in 20 years. The words hit Ethan like a punch. 20 years. He couldn't imagine not talking to his mom for a day, let alone decades. He wanted to ask more, but the bus screeched to a stop, its doors hissing open. Clara shuffled toward it, her movements slow but deliberate. Ethan followed, though his stop was miles away. Something about her story, unfinished and raw, pulled him along. On the bus, they sat across from each other, the hum of the engine filling the silence. Clara's hands fidgeted with her scarf, her eyes distant. Ethan, still clutching his phone, felt a strange urge to keep talking. "Why'd you wait so long?" he asked, his voice softer now, less guarded. Clara's gaze drifted to the window, where the city blurred past in streaks of light and shadow. "Pride," she said finally, "and fear. I thought time would fix things, but it only builds walls." She paused, her fingers tightening around the scarf. "When you're young, you think you have forever to make things right. Then one day, you're old, and forever's almost gone." Ethan shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the weight of her words. He wasn't used to the shrill conversations, the kind that made you think about things you'd rather ignore. "So why now?" he pressed. "Why call him tonight?" Clara's lips trembled, but before she could answer, a new voice cut through the bus's hum. "Clara?" Clara Hargrove. A man, mid-50s, stood in the aisle, his face a mix of shock and recognition. He wore a janitor's uniform, his hands calloused and stained with grease. Clara froze, her eyes widening. "Henry," she whispered. Ethan's head snapped up. This was the twist he hadn't seen coming. Henry, the man who'd just boarded, wasn't just a stranger knew Clara. The air grew thick with unspoken history. Henry's jaw tightened, his eyes searching Clara's face. "I thought you were," he trailed off, unable to finish. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm still here, Henry." She reached out, then stopped, her hand hovering in the air. Ethan watched, his heart pounding. Who was this guy? Not her son, clearly, but someone who mattered. The bus lurched forward, and Henry sat down across from Clara, his expression a storm of emotions. "You disappeared," Henry said, his voice low but sharp. "After everything, you just left." Clara's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "I had to," she said. "For him. For you." Ethan's mind raced. He felt like an intruder, caught in a story he didn't understand but couldn't escape. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who's he?" he asked, glancing between them. Clara's gaze met Henry's, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. "Henry was my brother-in-law," she said finally, "and the only one who knew why I left my son behind." The bus rattled through the city, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on Clara's face. Ethan sat frozen, his mind grappling with her last words. Brother-in-law, son, left behind. The pieces didn't fit, not yet, but the weight of Clara's confession hung heavy in the air. Henry, the man who'd just appeared, stared at her with a mix of anger and something softer grief, maybe, or regret. "You left us both," he said, his voice cracking. "You didn't just walk away from Daniel. You walked away from me." Clara's hands tightened around her scarf, her knuckles white. "I didn't want to," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "You know why I had to go, Henry. You saw what it was like." Ethan's eyes darted between them, his teenage curiosity warring with the instinct to stay quiet. He wanted to know more, but the raw pain in their voices made him feel like he was eavesdropping on a wound that hadn't healed. Henry leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You could have told me where you were going. A letter, a call, anything." His voice was quieter now, almost pleading. "Daniel grew up thinking you didn't care. I had to watch him hate you, Clara. Hate you for something you never explained." Clara's breath hitched, and Ethan saw tears glisten in her eyes. "I thought I was protecting him," she whispered. "From me. From what I was." She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I was a mess back then, Henry. You know that. The drinking, the fights, I wasn't fit to be his mother." Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd heard stories like this before, on TV or in books, but hearing it from Clara, her voice raw and real, was different. He glanced at Henry, expecting anger, but the man's face softened, his shoulders slumping. "You weren't the only one who was a mess," Henry said. "I wasn't exactly a saint either." The bus stopped, and a few passengers shuffled off, their footsteps fading into the rain outside. Ethan barely noticed. He was caught in the story unfolding before him, a story of broken families and unspoken truths. "So what happened?" he blurted out, unable to hold back. "Why'd you leave your kid?" Clara's eyes met his, and for the first time, she smiled a small, sad curve of her lips. "You're a curious one, aren't you?" she said. "I like that." She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. "I left because I thought Daniel deserved better. His father-me husband was gone, and I was drowning in grief and whiskey. Henry tried to help, but I was too far gone. I thought if I stayed, I'd drag Daniel down with me." Henry shook his head. "You should have trusted me to help you both," he said. "I was his uncle. I would have done anything." Clara's smile faded. "I know," she said, "but I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me fall apart any more than you already had." Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his mom asking where he was. He ignored it, too engrossed in Clara's story. "So you just disappeared?" he asked. Clara nodded. "I went to a shelter, then a halfway house. Got clean, eventually. But by then, years had passed, and I didn't know how to come back." Henry's voice was barely audible. "Daniel's in the city now," he said. "He's a doctor. Married, got a kid of his own." Clara's eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through her grief. "A doctor," she whispered. "And a grandchild?" Henry nodded, his expression softening further. "He's done well, Clara. But he's angry. He thinks you abandoned him." The bus lurched to a stop again, and Ethan realized they were nearing the end of the line. He glanced out the window, the city lights blurred by rain, and felt a pang of urgency. "Are you going to try to see him?" he asked Clara. She hesitated, her hands trembling again. "I want to," she said. "That's why I needed your phone. I found his number in an old letter, but I don't know if he'll want to hear from me." Before Ethan could respond, another voice interrupted, a woman, sharp and commanding, from the back of the bus. "Clara Hargrove, is that you?" All three of them turned. A woman in her 60s, dressed in a crisp blazer despite the late hour, stood in the aisle. Her face was stern, but her eyes held a flicker of something warmer. "It's been a long time," she said. Clara's jaw dropped. "Margaret?" she whispered. Ethan's head spun. Another twist, another piece of the puzzle. Who's she? He asked, his voice low but insistent. Clara's eyes never left the woman. My old caseworker, she said. The one who got me into the halfway house. Margaret stepped closer, her gaze softening as she looked at Clara. I never thought I'd see you again, she said. After you left the program, we all wondered what happened to you. Clara's voice trembled. I got clean, Margaret. I've been trying to make things right ever since. Ethan felt the weight of the moment, the collision of past and present. Clara's story wasn't just hers. Anna Maria, it was a web of lives, tangled and frayed, but still connected. He glanced at Henry, then at Margaret, and finally at Clara, whose eyes were fixed on the floor, as if afraid to hope. The bus hummed along its final route, the rain outside now a soft patter against the windows. Ethan sat on the edge of his seat, his phone forgotten in his pocket as he watched Clara, Henry, and Margaret, the unexpected trio bound by a past he could only glimpse. Clara's hands were still, for once, her scarf lying limp in her lap as she looked at Margaret, the caseworker who'd once been her lifeline. You look well, Margaret, Clara said, her voice fragile but warm. I never got to thank you properly. Margaret's stern face softened, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You don't owe me thanks, Clara. You did the hard work. Getting clean, staying clean, that was all you. She paused, glancing at Henry, then back at Clara. But I always wondered why you never came back for Daniel. Ethan felt a jolt at the name. Daniel, Clara's son, the man she'd been trying to reach. He leaned forward, his teenage impatience bubbling up. Yeah, why didn't you? He asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Clara's gaze dropped, her fingers tracing the frayed edge of her scarf. I tried, she said quietly. Once, maybe 10 years ago, I found out where he was, but when I saw him happy, successful, I couldn't bring myself to ruin it. Henry's jaw tightened. Ruin it, he said, his voice low but intense. Clara, he's your son. He deserved to know you were alive. His words carried a bitterness that made Ethan flinch. He could feel the years of hurt in Henry's tone, the kind of pain that lingers like a bruise. Margaret raised a hand, her voice calm but firm. Let's not judge what we don't fully understand, she said. Clara, tell me now? What's changed? Clara's eyes flickered with something Ethan couldn't name: hope, maybe, or desperation. I'm running out of time, she said. I'm not as strong as I used to be. I want to see him, to explain, before it's too late. Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't used to thinking about time running out, not at 16, when life felt endless. But Clara's words, heavy with the weight of years, made him feel small, like the world was bigger and sadder than he'd ever realized. So what's stopping you? He asked, his voice softer now. You've got his number. You called him tonight. Clara's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, Henry answered, his voice gruff. Fear, he said. She's afraid he'll reject her. Aren't you, Clara? Clara didn't deny it. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I don't know if he'll forgive me, she said. I don't know if I deserve it. Margaret leaned forward, her voice steady but kind. No one gets to decide what you deserve except you and Daniel, she said. You've carried this guilt for 20 years. Maybe it's time to let him carry some of the truth. Ethan watched, amazed at how Margaret's words seemed to anchor Clara, grounding her in a way he hadn't expected. The bus slowed, its brakes squealing as it pulled into the terminal. The driver's voice crackled over the speaker, announcing the end of the line. Ethan glanced outside, where the rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and reflective. What now? He asked, looking at Clara. Are you going to try again? Clara's eyes met his, and for a moment, she looked younger, as if his question had sparked something inside her. I think I have to, she said, but I don't know where to start. Henry shifted in his seat, his expression conflicted. I can take you to him, he said finally. I know where he lives, but only if you're sure. Ethan's heart raced. This was the moment Clara's story could shift, the moment she could face her son. But before Clara could respond, another voice broke the tension. Excuse me, a young woman said, standing a few seats away. She was in her 20s, with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a curious look in her eyes. I couldn't help overhearing. You're looking for Daniel Hargrove, right? Clara's breath caught, and Ethan's head snapped toward the woman. How do you know his name? He asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. The woman smiled, a mix of warmth and sadness. Because I'm his wife, she said. I'm Lily. The air seemed to vanish from the bus. Clara's hands flew to her mouth, and Henry's eyes widened. Ethan felt like he'd been dropped into the middle of a movie, one where every scene revealed a new twist. "You're married to Daniel?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Lily nodded, stepping closer. "I heard you say his name, and I saw you, Clara. I've seen pictures. Daniel keeps one in his office, an old one, from when he was a kid." She paused, her eyes softening. "He doesn't talk about you much, but I know he's been waiting for you to come back." Ethan's mind reeled. This wasn't just a chance encounter, it was fate, or something close to it. He looked at Clara, whose face was a mix of hope and terror. "What do I do?" she whispered, almost to herself. Lily reached out, her hand gentle on Clara's arm. "Come with me," she said. "Let me take you to him." The bus terminal was quiet now, the last passengers drifting into the night. Clara stood frozen, her eyes locked on Lily, the woman who'd just turned her world upside down. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched, his teenage impulsiveness urging him to speak, but he held back, sensing the gravity of the moment. Clara's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "You'd take me to him?" she asked Lily. "After all this time?" Lily's smile was steady, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Daniel's carried you with him, even if he doesn't say it," she said. "He deserves to know you're here. And you deserve to tell him your story." Clara's hands trembled, her scarf slipping to the floor. Henry bent to pick it up, his face unreadable, caught between hope and years of buried resentment. Ethan couldn't stay silent anymore. "You have to go," he said, his voice urgent. "You've been waiting for this, right? This is your chance." Clara looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if his words could anchor her courage. "You're right," she said finally, her voice steadier. "I've run from this too long." Margaret, the caseworker, nodded approvingly. "You're stronger than you think, Clara," she said. "You always were." Henry said nothing, but his hand rested briefly on Clara's shoulder, a silent gesture of support. Ethan felt a swell of pride, as if he'd played a part in this moment, even if it was just lending his phone. Lily led the way, her backpack bouncing as she walked toward a small car parked outside the terminal. Clara followed, her steps slow but determined, with Henry and Ethan trailing behind. The night air was cool, the rain-soaked streets gleaming under the streetlights. Ethan glanced at his phone, 3 missed calls from his mom, but he couldn't leave now. Not when Clara's story was so close to its turning point. In the car, Lily drove in silence, her eyes flicking to Clara in the rearview mirror. "He's at home tonight," she said. "He just got off a long shift at the hospital." Clara nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Does he talk about me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Lily hesitated, then said, "Sometimes. He wonders why you left. He's angry, but I think he's more hurt than anything." Ethan, squeezed into the back seat beside Henry, felt the weight of those words. He thought of his own mom, how they fought sometimes, but he couldn't imagine her vanishing. "What are you going to say to him?" he asked Clara, his curiosity getting the better of him. Clara's eyes met his in the dim light of the car. "The truth," she said, "that I loved him too much to let him see me at my worst. That I was weak, but I'm here now." Her voice cracked, and Ethan saw Henry's hand tighten on the armrest, as if holding back his own emotions. The car pulled into a quiet neighborhood, the houses small but warm with light. Lily stopped in front of a modest brick home, a tricycle abandoned on the lawn. "This is it," she said, turning to Clara. "He's inside with our daughter, Emma." Clara's breath caught at the mention of her granddaughter, and Ethan saw a flicker of joy break through her fear. They stepped out, the night air sharp and clear. Clara hesitated at the front walk, her hands trembling again. "What if he doesn't want me here?" she whispered. Lily took her arm gently. "Then you'll know you tried," she said. "But I think he'll want to hear you." Ethan stayed back, watching as Clara, Henry, and Lily approached the door. He felt like an outsider now, but he couldn't look away. Lily knocked, and the door opened, revealing a man in his 40s, his face tired but kind. "Daniel." Ethan knew it was him before anyone spoke. His eyes, so like Clara's, widened as he saw her. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. Clara's tears fell freely now. "Daniel," she said, stepping forward. "I'm so sorry." For a moment, no one moved. Then Daniel's arms opened, and Clara fell into them, her sobs muffled against his chest. Henry stood back, his eyes glistening, while Lily smiled, her hand resting on Clara's shoulder. Ethan's throat tightened. He hadn't expected to feel this much, not for a stranger he'd met at a bus stop. But watching Clara and Daniel, he felt the weight of their reunion, the years of pain and love finally colliding. He thought of his own family, the fights he'd brushed off, the apologies he'd never said. Maybe, he thought, it wasn't too late for him either. As Clara and Daniel spoke in hushed tones, Lily glanced back at Ethan, her smile warm. "Thank you," she mouthed, and Ethan nodded, his chest swelling with something he couldn't name. He turned to leave, knowing his part in this story was done, but Clara's voice stopped him. "Young man," she called, her voice stronger now. "You're part of this now. Don't be a stranger." Ethan grinned, his heart lighter than it had been all night. "I won't," he said, and as he walked into the night, the rain long gone, he felt the world shift just a little, a reminder that even the smallest moments, like lending a phone, could change everything.